What's up, guys? Mitch from RespectMyRegion.com back with another episode of the North American Weed Tour podcast. Today, I'm joined by a special guest, Eric from Cathartic Output and Cathartic Cannabis out in Illinois. How you doing today, Eric?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me on. Respect My Region's been blowing up recently, so it's a huge honor to be here.
Hell yeah, man. And we're honored to have you here to talk about, kind of cannabis in your market and a couple unique things that I don't know if our listeners or viewers are privy to. And I know a couple of them I don't know much about. So I'm excited to learn about. So I'd like to get, kind of started generally. I like to kick these off with just kind of your history around the plant of cannabis and how it's kind of pertained to your journey of stepping into this now blossoming industry.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess we'll go back, 10, 12 years. I started, using the plant back in high school. And, like any high schooler that's not that great at covering their tracks, I got in a little bit of trouble. And I felt like I was, you know, uh, unfairly judged for using cannabis to, self-medicate and, have a good time. So that kind of drove me to be the entrepreneur that I am. So I initially got my master's in accountancy and my CPA. So I'm a certified public accountant. Um, and so my first 3 years out of college, I worked at a public accounting firm in this department called audit. So I was running audits on manufacturing businesses with revenue streams up to $1 billion. And from there, I wanted to, transition my career to cannabis. And so I have a multiple different things that I've been working towards at this point. So in addition to, my professional career as a CPA, I also recorded music and I go under the name Cathartic Output. And in 2018, I got my first EP to release through this platform called Symphonic Distribution. And what they do, they essentially work with independent artists and get all of their streaming music uploaded to all the major streaming platforms. Mm-hmm. So at this point, I was listed on like iTunes, Spotify, Deezer, essentially every platform out there. You can Google Cathartic Output, and they were able to get me listed onto the streaming platforms. So this was kind of like my first surge of like excitement because it seems like pretty credible that you're listed up with all the major artists, and it did incredible things for like my SEO. So I was very searchable, and I just wanted to keep pushing out music and building up that brand. And then simultaneously, I was also working on this grow methodology called aquaponics. So aquaponics has been around for thousands of years. The Romans, the Aztecs, they all used this method of cultivation, which essentially is taking the waste product from fish and using it towards fertilizer to uptake into their crops and have like a full cycle of nitrogen where you're receiving outputs from not only the fish that you're feeding, but your plants as a crop as well. So you get 2 outputs for 1 input, which is what really like interested me in the topic of aquaponics. So I've been doing my own system at home since roughly around the same time as I started Cathartic Output. Initially, I wasn't growing cannabis with the aquaponics, but January 1st, 2020, everything changed here in Illinois because medical grow was now allowed of cannabis. So having my medical card at the time, I kind of jumped in head first to try to, I've never grown cannabis before, but I took this 3-week workshop from a company. I think it was like their first workshop ever because it was the first time cannabis has been legal, and it was in January 2020. But yeah, I learned how to grow cannabis, just the basics, nothing to do with aquaponics. The class was completely based on a soil grow, but it had a lot of the fundamentals of growing cannabis that I didn't know before. And I was able to then, along with a bunch of other research and forums online, kind of merge my two knowledge bases of aquaponics and growing cannabis. And then I created this, it's a 10-gallon tank system. So I didn't create the aquaponics system. It's a system called Aquasprouts. It's kind of marketed towards like educational, in classroom. It's not like grow your own cannabis, system, but I was able to take it and kind of transform it into my own to be able to grow with just a 2x2x2 canopy space. I can turn about a quarter pound every 3 months out of the system. So, I mean, it doesn't really matter how many plants I have in there. It's mainly like just the canopy space in general that kind of dictates the limitations of what my yield is. And that's where I am. So, I mean, I got a lot of things moving in the cannabis industry, trying to just build as much equity as I can, in many different places, planting as many seeds as I can, because I know this industry is going to blow up, trying to, network, get out there, do everything I can.
Absolutely. And aquaponics is something that was one of the things, in doing some research on you. And that's obviously something that's big on your website. There's a little bit of education. I even saw that diagram of kind of showing hydroponics versus that. I'm obviously very familiar with hydroponics. I think anybody in cannabis is, or even fans of, West Coast music is familiar with the term hydro or hydroponics, at least in terms of, Dr. Dre and that era of music. Some people that are in the industry are familiar of hydroponics as the actual system that it's used to grow. But I thought it was really unique because it showed, I believe you showed the diagram. The example is kind of showing it's like a closed loop system, right? Like everything, like you're saying, kind of the output of one thing is an input for the next thing. And it's kind of you're building this little micro ecosystem, correct?
Yeah. That's exactly, how I would explain it. And you do, as you compare it to hydro, I've personally never done like pure hydro, but from my understanding is like it's such a delicate system that people can like completely trash an entire grow under like one pH spike or drop. So one of the benefits to aquaponics over hydro is not only is it all organically sourced, but you have a stable system where you're not gonna like experience those wide fluctuations in your specs, because it is essentially just replicating nature and the nitrogen cycle. And as long as you're not putting in a bunch of chemicals or inorganic things that shouldn't be within that cycle, you're not going to experience the risk of complete crop failure, like you would with hydro. But yet you still benefit from that like rapid root growth and not having the roots restricted by the soil. There's kind of just like this unlimited space for them to grow and thrive.
And do you see that as a viable way to grow at scale, or is that more of like a home grow and like craft grow model?
So I do think that it's definitely scalable. I mean, I'm following people online that are doing this at scale. I think I might actually have the smallest um, system out there that's growing cannabis. And honestly, I take a lot of pride in that because I think like that's kind of like my niche.
Yeah.
Um, is and that's the reason that I'm doing this is because I legitimately don't have the room for a tent.
Hmm.
Because I live in Chicago, I live in an apartment. Um, you know, not a ton of space for extracurricular activities. Um, but I did have a fish tank, so like I just had to build vertically on top of my fish tank to be able to grow, and it's been a pretty awesome journey. Um, I've learned a lot along the way, had several failures, had a lot of successes, but now I'm trying to kind of like take that one step further and like teach people how to replicate this method,
Hmm.
because I have put in 5 years of R&D into getting this aquaponic system, um, you know, fully cycled and just abundant full of microorganisms. Along with, there are certain things that you have to do to treat the water to keep it um, healthy for the fish, but also have the right nutrients for the plant because you won't get every single macro and micronutrient
Hmm.
from just fish feed. Um, so there are some supplements that I've found through trial and error that you have to um, there's really no other way to figure it out at this point because everything's just there's information out there, but you have to search for it. You have to go through forums. You have to really problem solve your own issues.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's kind of how it is just growing cannabis in general, I'm sure,
Hmm.
but maybe more so with aquaponics having like a whole nother nuance to it.
Absolutely. That's why I constantly hear people in the cultivation space say that it is growing cannabis is a constant, a never-ending identifying problems and then isolating the problem and then figuring out the solution. I constantly hear that from cultivators that that's just no matter what cultivation method you're going, it's not a matter of if issues will happen. It's when, and being able to isolate and identify, especially when you're growing at scale. It's the isolation is super important. But for you guys out there in Illinois, home grow is I live in the Washington market where home grow is not allowed unless you're a medical card holder. And Washington's kind of done a decent job. I know some people out there will disagree with me, but I'll say they've done a decent job. And I'm not saying for better or for worse, but eradicating the medical market and kind of pushing everyone to recreational or adult use. But for you guys in Illinois, home grow has been something that the more I talk to people out there, it seems just widely embraced, widely talked about. People are really seeking that. And then I know the way the industry was rolled out without craft licenses, that there is for the connoisseurs, there's that need of craft cannabis. And I've spoke to many people who say the only way to get craft cannabis is either grow your own or know another grower. So what is kind of your take on the importance of home grow cultivation pertaining to the Illinois market?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the dispensaries are complete ripoffs, um, especially for recreational users because not only is it street prices plus tax, so people are paying like $90 to $100 an eighth out here. Um, so I'm sure you assume people are searching for that alternative, whether it
Mhm.
be their old guy, which I mean, I'm not one to judge because I've certainly uh, resorted to that, but um, there are risks with black market cannabis. So definitely know your sources. But if you can, you know, get your medical card and grow your own, it's just so much more rewarding to, be able to smoke your own product and provide that product to other people for free. Like, people are so like gracious when you just give them free weed. That's like kind of like one of my favorite parts about this whole venture. I mean, I'm trying to do everything above board. So full disclosures, nothing's for sale. But I am trying to build out a brand within this craft grow space that, while the barriers of entry to the legal market are so high, that, it's not really a feasible venture for me. There are so many people that put all their eggs into grabbing one of these craft grow licenses, and the lottery was just not the greatest. It was pretty rigged. Basically, you could just buy as many entries into the lottery as you can. And I think one ticket was like $25K. So, for somebody like me, that's like everything. And then you have all the MSOs that's nothing, and they could buy 10 entrances to the lottery. So, I mean, it's no surprise that the large companies are the ones that came out on top of the craft grow lottery, and there's still another round of objections that I think legal is currently going through. There might be a whole nother lottery as a result of the two lotteries that have just been poorly implemented by the state. They promised social equity, and it seemed legitimate at first, but so in Illinois, to be a social equity applicant, it's kind of hilarious. So you have to live in a low income area, or you have to have an infraction on your record. So those both sound like pretty good, rules. But then also, if you're a family member of somebody that lives in a low income area or has an infraction on your record, then you're also a social equity applicant. So that just opens the door to like everybody that has a crazy brother, not even crazy brother, but like that, I don't know, that was not the right word, but like anyone that lives in the right area to be one of these applicants, or has an infraction from college or something. I mean, that's obscene to me. Like, there's so many people that fall into that bucket that shouldn't be a social equity applicant.
There's, like you said, the college, right? Like, how many college students get arrested for that, and you look at, the privilege level of people that go to college. I went to college, right? But and I have a weed charge from college, and I can tell you from just my standpoint, I should not be I should not be a candidate for anything social equity, right? Like, I do not fit the mold for that. And so I think that's a very fair assessment.
Yep. So as of now, not much is changing in terms of prices, product qualities, hit or miss. There are definitely some good cultivators out there. But then again, they're working on such a mass scale that mold has been slipping through the cracks. Multiple occasions, the products have been recalled because of mold and other impurities. And that's going to happen, but it's mainly the response of all these MSOs that they don't seem like that they need to be held accountable to those infractions. Then they're not recalling everything that they should be. So quite frankly, I don't totally trust dispensary weed any more than I do, from the guy that I've been picking up before lead was legal. So
yeah, and that's something, you mentioned that a lot of legal prices are very similar to street prices, but they also have tax on top of it. And it's very common, like, say in the state of California, the majority of stuff sold at dispensaries is marked up like 3x. I mean, sometimes it's more, sometimes it's a little less. That's just general, especially when you look at most states. The state is taking about 40% of that to taxes. So a store buys something, 3x's it, and then they lose, half of that end fund of what they sell to a consumer. But as opposed to California, like you could get an eighth of really top shelf bud at the dispensary for 85 $90 out the door for the best of the best. That same quality level and strain, on the black market, where California, the black market is pretty established. You could get that same eighth for 35 40, basically buy for wholesale whatever they sold it to the store from, to get it
Yeah.
outside of the market. And it's unique, like in Washington where I live, top shelf cannabis is like 45 to 55, which is pretty reasonable, with tax out the door. That's your final price. And so, in markets like that in Washington, the black market isn't as prevalent, or out, we don't even say the black market, but outside of the regulated market isn't as prevalent, because the cost, it's affordable to the end consumer. And I think a lot of these states, through their structure and their regulation, and their greediness for taxes, they increase this market where you price it at a certain amount, you're going to keep the home grower, the black market, alive and thriving. If you loosen up that tax greed and regulation, you make it a little bit more affordable for the people, and you give people no reason to shop outside of the regulated market, right? When pricing and quality is all stabilized. So we've been watching you guys in Illinois, and are looking forward to that maturity of you guys getting a little bit more quality and better prices. But it definitely seems like, home grow is prevalent. And so one of the other things I want to ask is, with home grow being so prevalent in your state, there also seems to be quite a bit of an online community, which I'm sure you're a part of, in just sharing like people's different home grow, like you said, giving it away, people trying it, people comparing it, people reviewing it, and just sharing tips and secrets. So how important is community, whether it's just online or even an online version of your localized community, but how important is community in advancing home grow?
Oh, I mean, super important. I mean, not only is it like my main source of grow knowledge and um, troubleshooting when I do run into issues, but it's also just like a great place to you know praise the cultivators that are doing their thing, call out the ones that aren't, um, yeah, provide awareness to um, just the rest of the community of what you've experienced, what you should avoid, um, what products you think are good, and also support like social equity, because a lot of these MSOs currently, they're talk and talk, but they don't really
Mm,
have like a ton of action. Um, I mean, they'll shell out some money for social equity, but that seems to be like the extent that of their propaganda. They want you to think that they're in it for everybody, but yet they lobby against home grow.
mhm.
So, like, are you really for social equity if you're making all your customers pay $100 an eighth? Probably not.
Yeah, and that's an important point that I don't think a lot of people get. Like I was telling you before we got on air, Washington State, they're trying to figure out social equity like 6 years into legalization. We don't have that. We don't have home grow, but home grow is a form of social equity, right? Like cannabis is the ability to get in this industry requires so much capital and access to capital and non-traditional capital, because you can't go to a bank and get a loan even if you have a bulletproof business plan. And so that prices out, you look at social equity, you're talking about providing opportunities for those at disadvantaged communities. If you're from a disadvantaged community, you likely don't have capital, access to capital, or access to education on how to receive capital. And so I want to get into cannabis. If you don't have any of that, there is no way to really get your foot in the door besides just being an employee somewhere, which is great to get information and knowledge, but doesn't give you the ability to really take ownership and of your knowledge. and also doesn't give you an ability to stack up capital to get into this industry. But I say all that to say that home grow allows people to get into this space, build expertise, and really take control of what they learn at their own pace, right? At a very, very low startup cost. So what would you advise? I mean, I know you're growing in a very specific way, but when it comes to home grow, what is kind of the startup capital on average, or what do you think is an estimate of what someone would need to get started with a home grow system?
I mean, the least amount of investment that you can make would be a pot, some you know, pH neutral soil, and some autoflower seeds. You know, you can grow those out your window. You might not get the tightest nugs or the best product, but you will experience the process
Mhm.
from start to finish of growing cannabis and all the nutrients and like everything's there. So like legitimately, there's no barriers to growing cannabis financially other than whatever an autoflower seed will cost you.
Yeah, 20 to 50 bucks or something for a pot, some dirt, and a couple seeds.
And then from there, I mean, personally, I'm not that big of a fan of autoflower seeds. I don't think their growth is all that robust, but I do get a lot of satisfaction out of starting them for people and giving them out like in the springtime, so people can experience their first grow, and then I'll kind of like help them along the way. If they have questions, they'll shoot me a text. So that's kind of what I've been kind of focusing my brand on, and now I'm moving towards trying to find actually a couple participants that want to replicate my aquaponics systems.
Mm.
Um, and then from there, once I have some concrete material, maybe roll out like an actual like product that I bring to market. Um, but honestly, I don't suggest jumping into growing cannabis for the first time with aquaponics. I was doing it aquaponics for 2.5 years before I fully jumped into aquaponic cannabis.
Oh, so you're
Um,
just doing it with other plants.
yeah. So that's how I kind of started off. So I didn't like just fully jump into both. Honestly, if you wanted to get into growing cannabis, I would suggest growing autoflowers first. If you have the space, a tent is an awesome asset to have. And honestly, I wish I could have the space to grow a tent plant as well. Um, but I don't. So I'm working with all the resources that I have, and I think if people are also limited by space as well, there are a lot of different workarounds that I can help them out with, and um, get them to experience their first cannabis grow. It's just super exciting to see people um, get that enjoyment out of their first harvest.
Absolutely. So I need to work out. I grew one plant in my front yard. I live in Seattle, so we don't have the best sunlight, and we're not supposed to grow. So I didn't grow. I may have grown in my yard. Just one plant. I'm very high level connoisseur, so I still have my harvest in a Tupperware somewhere, but it's not up to my quality level to consume. So maybe I'll bake with it. But that's one of the big talks in Washington where we don't have home grow is the people lobbying to stop it is thinking obviously people won't go to retail. I spent a lot of money at retail. I've even grown at home, and I did not slow down my spending at retail. But to move away from cannabis a little bit to music, well, we'll tie them both in. So obviously, part of your brand and your interest is both in music and cannabis. I respect my region. That is, we that is what we are, music and cannabis, man. That is our language. So how do you see music and cannabis intersect? Like, how do they intersect for you?
I mean, initially, I just love smoking weed and listening to music. So that's kind of the first intersection point. And then also playing music.
Hmm.
while intoxicated. I feel like it does impair my playing abilities a little bit. Um, so I don't know what takeaway there is from that, but I do like when I'm recording, I try to keep the smoke minimal. I actually have a little more success with microdosing.
Okay.
Um, just enough to really make all the connections. But anyways, as my brand goes, it's really just such an awesome platform that you can have online, like a whole online persona. I have a verified Facebook page because all my music is listed on all the streaming platforms, and then I've been able to bring in cannabis with my Facebook page. I'm not sure why I haven't been deleted yet, but um, yeah. So I've been able to, just drive a lot of traffic with my music, both to my music and from my music
Mm.
to my cannabis page, because people that like music are often, interested in cannabis as well, and vice versa. So as a brand, like I see all these like mainstream artists, Burner, Snoop Dogg. I mean, a lot of rappers right now are currently doing their music, but then they also have like a cannabis brand on the side.
Hmm.
And while I don't have the capital to like fully roll out a cannabis brand that's like licensed on uh, and can be sold through dispensaries, I still have a lot of things to share, a lot of value adds that I can bring to people to build a brand kind of in a roundabout way outside of your standardized market. Um,
Yeah.
and and then also the traffic to for my listeners and my music, that's like a source of monetization. So that's kind of like my end goal. While I'm not like making any profit currently on the cannabis, I am bringing in monetized revenue through my streaming. Um, so that's like another angle that I have.
And the mixture of the two, I mean, is so important. I think because there's a lot of people. Obviously, like I said, our platform is very heavily in music and cannabis. We started in music. My roots are in music um, creation and just involved in different levels of the industry. And I think that's an important thing, even tying back into social equity. A lot of people in the music space um, really like are curious, how do I get into cannabis? A common thing is, how do I get my own strain? How do I get my own product? And what a lot of people don't understand, it's very difficult, as you've explained. It's very difficult to break into the legal industry, but also, even if you do break into it, the margins on these products are very small. It's much like streaming. Streaming is a low margin game. You have to get a lot of streams to have a source of revenue. Cannabis is the same thing. Even though that eighth at the store is 60, $70, if you were to be a brand partnered with it, there's only a couple dollars on that $60 purchase that could be, if you negotiate well, allocated to you. And so it is still a low margin thing. But I think a lot of what you're saying, right, is this industry is big right now, but it's going to continue to get bigger. And just carving out a brand and a connection into it now is an investment that's, like you're saying, it's not necessarily paying off on the cannabis side now, but the future is, the opportunity is there. And I think that's a big takeaway that anyone involved in music can have, is that no matter the barriers of entry, you can start integrating and aligning yourself with this industry and position yourself to be a part of this boom. Where do you kind of envision the future of legal cannabis and music?
I mean, I think it's just gonna kind of continue on the course that it has kind of blown up over the past year or two, with all of these like music artists. Justin Bieber now has
Mhm.
a cannabis line, so I feel like the more that mainstream artists, but also just celebrities in general, um, that want to build out their personal brand, and cannabis is just a sexy way to monetize their brand, because that's one of like a celebrity's biggest asset is their following.
Hmm.
And in order, they're always going to find ways to market products using that brand. And right now, cannabis just seems like the hot thing to be um, using that platform for. Um, so I definitely expect we'll be seeing a lot more um, from mainstream artists. Um, and I guess the legal industry, just in general, I don't see it coming, you know, on a federal level anytime soon, as much as people that are hyping it seem to think. I think it's going to stay at the state level for at least until Biden's out of office. He's not going to do shit. So yeah, I think like once everything's like federally legal, you're going to be seeing a whole lot more of it because there's like so many celebrities that don't want their name tarnished, quote unquote, by the illegality of it. I mean, like Elon Musk takes one hit on Joe Rogan's podcast and Tesla tanks like 10%. So, I mean, it has its pros and cons. It's just a matter of what the celebrity or the artist wants their brand to be um, represented by.
Yeah, the stigma has a long ways to go, but there's definitely some game in there. You mentioned that a celebrity's biggest asset is their audience, and I think or following. I think for people out there, again, there's a lot of people that follow us that are music creatives. That's definitely a big takeaway to take away. In this day and age, with record deals, you don't make a ton of money off of music. Streaming isn't not necessarily the best way to make music, but if you're able to captivate an audience, you get monetized off your music, but you're also able to tour, sell merch, do these product integrations. That audience is such an asset. Even if it's small, you can leverage that audience to build more audience or to monetize, or as your audience grows, it opens up new monetization avenues. So that's just a big takeaway for me. But one of the things I also want to ask is, with Cathartic Output, is what genre do you classify? I was browsing on your Spotify. Definitely get, I had a hard time penciling because one of the songs on there sounded like there was like like a rapper on there. It sounded, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
some other
yeah.
stuff was just instrumental. Definitely multiple instruments, some guitar. You get some rock vibes, a little bit of hip hop. So where do you kind of do you box yourself in, or do you like I don't subscribe to the box mentality?
I mean, I don't know. Google has me classified as new era instrumental.
Okay.
I don't really have something that I like identify as. You know, the the recording wise, the I'm a guitarist.
Okay.
Everything else I compose just based on a MIDI keyboard and some drum loops that I make a lot of edits to the drum loops so they
Mhm.
fall right onto the grid. But yeah, it's just kind of like I sit down. I don't have anything written out. I just kind of record and play it by ear, quite literally. So yeah, I don't think I can really like I don't know sum it all up in a single genre. It's just
What are
kind of
you? What kind of music are you inspired by then?
so my like learning the guitar. It was a lot of classic rock, um, Zeppelin, the Beatles, um, Van Halen, um, things like that. But then now I mainly listen to like hip hop and R&B with a little bit of rock. So it's kind of like a merge between those two worlds. And so it's pretty unique. And then another, I guess, kind of aspect to that is when I was first kind of pushing this music out, I was like trying to think like, what is my target audience here? So I had this idea that I was going to try to like market my music to influencers to use on their social media posts.
Mhm.
So this was long before like Instagram, TikTok had music like integrated onto their platform. Um, so there was like a couple accounts that I actually successfully got onto their page with my music on there, and they got like 50,000 views on this video. I wasn't monetizing anything on it. It was purely just like to provide value to this brand in hopes that maybe they'll, you know,
Mhm.
share my profile and get some organic hits that way. But now that's kind of like come full circle, and one of my biggest focuses because that's where my highest like monetization is coming from is from the Instagram video hits. So people are using my music because it's just available to them on the platform. Um, so now that's kind of where I'm trying to drive my marketing efforts because like last week I found that one of my songs, "She's a Pirate," there was an influencer on TikTok that has like 6 million likes or something, and that video got 500,000 views.
Mm.
And I had my music on it, and I don't know what TikTok's like monetization, um, you know, platform is, but either way, 500,000 people saw a video with my music on it and had the ability to click into my song, and I could tell that I got a lot of hits from
Mhm.
my iTunes and my Spotify streaming specifically for "She's a Pirate" because of that video. So that's kind of where I'm trying to, focus my efforts and getting people to support me that way.
Yeah, and that instrumental based music is very friendly for online content or content licensing, and I think that's another takeaway for musicians out there is understanding demographic you want to reach, where that demographic's out, and some of the best distribution models to kind of crack the code. Because just promoting Spotify by itself, as I know, and anyone doing music is a difficult, slow grind. But being able to access, obviously people with platforms playing your music is an easy way, and not an easy way because it's not easy, but a way to I'll just say a way. I won't say easy, just a way to reach a much wider audience. Um, and that's no, that's great to hear. And it's also funny. You said you had this rock influence and are been listening to more hip hop. Have you noticed something I've noticed as of late? Is a lot of hip hop and R&B is kind of moving to very acoustic and like acoustic guitar and Spanish guitar. Like there's a lot of stripped down beats in both R&B and rap right now that are some of them have no drums and are just guitar, and some are pretty much a drum loop and guitar. Is that something you're noticing as well?
Uh, I mean, to be honest, that hasn't been like something that I've picked up on, but I'll definitely keep an eye out. I mean, I guess I would consider like a lot of the beats like lo-fi,
Yeah.
kind of just like the chill. So maybe that's kind of what you're referring to, but um, yeah, I'll definitely keep an eye out that on that as a trend
Yeah,
for
there's like I just was listening. I don't know. I'm here in the Bay right now, so the Bay Area is a caveat. I'm from Seattle. Radio in Seattle fucking sucks. It's not good. We don't have a very good local music culture outside of rock. Obviously, iconic for Jimi Hendrix, Nirvana, that rich history. But I'm more in the hip hop realm. No disrespect to Mix-a-Lot, his old school, or Macklemore. Not my cup of tea. We just don't have, when you come to Seattle and turn on the hip hop station, you're going to hear like the bubblegum top 40 bullshit, as opposed to where I'm at now in like Oakland. You put on the radio and it's just like a whole nother realm of like, damn, this is like really good music. But anyways, I just noticed like Mozzie, Jasmine Sullivan, Blast, a couple of these guys. I hear just like a lot of guitar right now. I don't know, something I'm picking up. But I think as music has as hip hop has become more mainstream, obviously like country has taken a lot of elements of hip hop and song structure and beat, and then pop music too has obviously latched onto it. Um, Where can people find your music?
So it's like I said on all streaming platforms, iTunes, Spotify, anything that you're using currently. I'm pretty sure you can find me under Cathartic Output. That's my musical artist name. You can also find links to my streaming services on www.catharticoutput.com. And you can also get linked to my Facebook page and cannabis Instagram account as well.
As you guys, if you're interested in the music, go check it out. If you're interested in aquaponics or learning about homegrow, check it out. Reach out. There's definitely some resources on there, and I'm assuming you're welcome to people reaching out. Is there anything else you'd like to plug before we get you up out of here?
Um, I mean, I guess the Chillinois podcast. That's this platform that I kind of got rolling on with all my Illinois networks. So they are the co-founders of the Reddit page Illinois Trees, IL Trees, and they're up to like 17,000 followers. So if you're interested in the Illinois cannabis and the underground culture, that would be a great spot to hit. I know you were asking about that earlier, and they also were kind enough to have me featured as their theme song to the podcast, and they've been getting some pretty high profile guests. One in particular, Tommy Chong, has been on there twice. So that's been, pretty valuable for me as well as just everybody in Illinois. It's great to have representation like that.
Awesome. That's awesome. I've heard of that podcast. It's been recommended, and I've seen it. It's obviously a great name, Chillinois. I mean, that's a pretty solid name. I did not know you had the song on there. That's another just great output, and I continually, just because I'm passionate about passing on game to other musicians, that's a great platform for your music, is being able to make a song for some of these podcasts, especially if it's in alignment with a demographic or an industry you're looking to build. Eric, super appreciate your time on here and joining us today, and breaking down a little bit of aquaponics, home grow, your music, your start in the Illinois market, man. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. This is the North American Weed Tour podcast. We will be back at you guys, I think, with another episode today, but we're on this a couple times a week. And so we'll be checking in with everyone here real soon, man. Thank you.